Have you ever felt exhausted and hopeless when facing challenges in life? It's as if the weight of your struggles is too much to bear, and no matter how hard you try, you can't seem to find a way out. But could it be that these difficulties are not just random events or mere coincidences, but actually a part of a bigger plan from God? What if the challenges you face have a greater purpose, one that is shaping you, your faith, and your future? Life is always full of challenges, some small, some life-changing. From difficulties at work to problems in relationships, and even health struggles, we often feel burdened and overwhelmed. In those moments, it's easy to wonder why these hardships are happening and whether they'll ever end. Yet, could it be that these challenges are not just random? Could they be part of God's divine plan for us? The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who faced monumental challenges. Job endured great loss and suffering but never gave up on his faith. Moses faced the challenge of leading an entire nation out of slavery, and through those trials, God revealed himself to Moses and the people. These stories remind us that God often uses our struggles to fulfill his greater purpose in our lives, helping us grow, learn, and deepen our faith. In fact, many of the greatest lessons we learn come from facing challenges, not avoiding them. Through the struggles, God's plan for us becomes clearer, and we begin to see how these difficulties fit into his greater design. When we understand that the challenges in life are not just random events, but part of God's greater plan, we can find strength and meaning even in the most difficult times. When we shift our perspective and view challenges as opportunities for growth, rather than obstacles to overcome, we begin to develop a deeper trust in God's plan for our lives. Recognizing that God has a purpose for everything we go through enables us to maintain faith and hope throughout our journey. It's easy to lose sight of that purpose when we're in the middle of pain, confusion, or hardship. But God promises that he will never leave us. By trusting that he has a plan, even in the most trying moments, we can move forward with a sense of peace and confidence, knowing that the challenges we face are molding us into the people we were meant to become. Embracing challenges as part of God's plan doesn't make the hardship go away, but it helps us approach each struggle with the belief that there is meaning and growth to be found. Instead of questioning, "Why me?" we begin to ask, "What can I learn from this? How is God shaping me through this experience?" When we learn to embrace life's challenges in this way, we allow God to use them to draw us closer to him and help us fulfill his purpose for our lives. Life is full of challenges, and while they may seem like obstacles that disrupt our peace and happiness, they are often opportunities for spiritual growth. Challenges have the unique ability to reveal deeper aspects of ourselves, to bring us closer to God, and to strengthen our faith in ways that moments of comfort and ease never can. In this section, we will explore how challenges are not just hardships to endure, but essential tools that, when approached with the right mindset, can lead us to profound spiritual development and a deeper relationship with God. At first glance, challenges often appear as nothing more than painful or uncomfortable experiences that we want to avoid. Whether it's personal failure, the loss of a loved one, a difficult relationship, or a financial crisis, these trials can leave us feeling discouraged, exhausted, and uncertain. However, spiritual growth is often the result of facing these challenges head-on, rather than avoiding them. In the Bible, challenges are frequently depicted as pivotal moments for spiritual transformation. Job is one of the most well-known biblical figures who went through immense suffering. He lost his wealth, his children, and his health, yet he did not turn away from God. Instead, through his suffering, Job discovered a deeper understanding of God's sovereignty, and his faith was refined and strengthened. Despite his hardships, Job's final relationship with God was far deeper than it had been before his trials. His spiritual growth wasn't achieved through comfort or success, but through pain and perseverance. This is an important lesson for us. Spiritual growth often occurs in the midst of our greatest struggles. Similarly, Moses faced great trials. From his time in Egypt to leading the Israelites out of slavery and through the wilderness. Moses' challenges were many and profound, but they ultimately shaped him into the leader God needed him to be. It was through these trials that Moses came to understand God's guidance and power in a way that would have been impossible without the hardship he endured. The difficulties he faced didn't break him. They molded him into a vessel for God's purpose. God's ability to use life's challenges as a tool for spiritual growth is not limited to biblical figures. It extends to us as well. Challenges force us to dig deeper within ourselves, to confront our fears, doubts, and limitations, and to ask important spiritual questions. It is in the midst of these difficulties that we often encounter God in new and profound ways, learning to depend on His wisdom, grace, and strength. Just as physical exercise strengthens our muscles, challenges have the ability to strengthen our faith. When we face adversity, our faith is tested. The process may be difficult and painful, but it is through testing that our faith grows deeper and more resilient. Faith isn't something that is built by easy circumstances. It is developed through the trials we face, especially when we have no other choice but to rely on God. The process of spiritual growth is similar to the growth of muscle. The more we endure and the more we resist the temptation to give up, the stronger our faith becomes. Each challenge gives us an opportunity to exercise our trust in God and develop perseverance. When we face hardships with an open heart and a willingness to learn, we begin to understand that God uses those moments to build our character and deepen our dependence on Him. For instance, consider someone who is facing financial struggles. Instead of giving in to worry, they learn to trust God's provision more deeply. They may not see immediate results, but over time, their ability to trust God in the midst of uncertainty grows stronger. As they learn to trust God with their finances, they begin to trust Him in other areas of their life as well. Romans 5:3-4 highlights this concept, saying, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." This scripture shows that suffering, when faced with faith, leads to perseverance, which in turn develops character and ultimately hope. Our faith grows as we endure, and our character is shaped in ways that would not be possible without facing challenges. The Bible is full of stories where challenges were integral to the spiritual development of its characters. One of the most powerful examples is the story of Job. Job's life is a testament to the idea that trials can refine our faith and help us grow spiritually. Job was a man of great faith, but it was through his immense suffering that his faith was truly tested. He lost everything: his wealth, his children, and his health. Yet, despite his circumstances, Job never cursed God. Instead, he questioned, he wrestled with his faith, and through his pain, he grew closer to God. In Job 42:5, after all his suffering, Job says, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." This statement reflects Job's deeper relationship with God after his trials. He did not know God on a surface level, but now had experienced God in a personal and profound way. His faith was no longer abstract. It was grounded in the reality of God's presence. Even in the midst of suffering, Job's challenges did not diminish his faith. Rather, they made his faith stronger and more authentic. Moses is another figure whose life was marked by challenges that led to great spiritual growth. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses was reluctant and afraid. He faced significant challenges in dealing with Pharaoh, leading the Israelites through the wilderness and confronting their disobedience. Yet, through every difficulty, Moses grew in his understanding of God's power and faithfulness. The challenges Moses faced were not just tests of his leadership, but were meant to strengthen his trust in God's ability to provide and protect. By the time Moses stood before the Israelites at the end of his journey, he was no longer the hesitant leader he had once been. His faith had been refined through the challenges God had placed before him. The lives of David and Paul also serve as reminders that spiritual growth often comes through suffering. David, who faced many trials, including the persecution of King Saul, and Paul, who was imprisoned and beaten for his faith, both saw their faith grow stronger as they faced difficulties. These men didn't run from their struggles, they embraced them as opportunities for deeper trust in God. In this section, we have seen how challenges are not just obstacles to overcome, but opportunities for spiritual growth. Difficulties help us discover deeper aspects of ourselves and bring us closer to God. Through challenges, we strengthen our faith as we rely on God for guidance and strength. Just like physical exercise helps build muscle, challenges help us build spiritual resilience. Biblical examples such as Job, Moses, David, and Paul demonstrate that spiritual growth often comes through facing difficulties. When we allow ourselves to experience these challenges with faith, we deepen our relationship with God, develop perseverance, and become more equipped to fulfill the purpose He has for us. Ultimately, the challenges we face are not the end of our story. They are stepping stones to greater spiritual maturity, trust, and reliance on God. They help us grow into the individuals God has created us to be, and through them, we can find meaning and purpose in the most difficult moments of life. Challenges are often seen as obstacles, barriers, or burdens in our lives. But what if we were to shift our perspective and view these challenges as guidance from God? What if these difficulties were not signs that God had abandoned us, but instead a means by which He leads us toward a greater purpose? In this section, we will explore how challenges can serve as God's guidance, helping us discover our true purpose, guiding us toward decisions we might never have made otherwise, and teaching us to depend on God in ways we couldn't imagine. We will also explore biblical examples, such as Moses, to show how challenges are used by God to fulfill His divine plan for our lives. Many times, when we face challenges, we can feel abandoned or alone. It's easy to think that if God truly loved us, we wouldn't have to go through such difficulties. However, the truth is that challenges are often a means by which God guides us. They are tools that shape us, help us grow, and reveal His plan for our lives. Rather than seeing these trials as punishment or signs of divine neglect, we can choose to see them as divine opportunities, moments when God is actively leading us towards something greater than we could ever imagine. God's guidance does not always come through calm, easy circumstances. More often, it comes through the storms of life, where we are forced to rely on His wisdom and strength. These moments of hardship help us discern what is truly important in life and lead us to make decisions that align more closely with God's will. For example, consider the story of Abraham. God asked Abraham to leave everything he knew and go to an unknown land. Genesis 12:1-4. Abraham faced great uncertainty, but this challenge was part of God's plan to make him the father of many nations. Abraham's journey was not without hardship, but through his obedience, God used these challenges to reveal His greater purpose. Abraham's story shows us that challenges, while uncomfortable, can be divine invitations to walk in faith toward God's promises. When we face trials, we should remember that they are often God's way of guiding us to a deeper understanding of our calling and purpose. While it might feel difficult in the moment, challenges often push us beyond our comfort zones and force us to make decisions that lead us to new opportunities, deeper faith, and a more fulfilling life. The life of Moses is a powerful example of how challenges can serve as God's guidance and preparation for a larger mission. Moses' life was marked by a series of monumental challenges, but each one played a role in preparing him for the great mission that God had called him to. When Moses was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he was faced with a daunting task. He was up against Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the time, and his people were enslaved. At first, Moses doubted his ability to lead. He felt inadequate, and he even questioned why God had chosen him for such an enormous task. Exodus 3:11-1-2. But God didn't just call Moses to lead. He also equipped him through the challenges he faced. Each obstacle Moses encountered in his journey, whether it was confronting Pharaoh, dealing with the complaints of the Israelites, or facing the dangers of the wilderness, was a tool used by God to mold him into the leader the Israelites needed. Every challenge Moses faced helped him understand God's will more deeply and trust in God's power to bring about the victory. The burning bush encounter, Exodus 3, was just the beginning of Moses' journey. He had to confront his own fears, learn to trust in God's plan, and step out in faith, even when the path ahead seemed uncertain. His difficulties became the means through which God led him to become the great leader who would deliver God's people. Moses' challenges were not random or purposeless. They were the very means by which God equipped him to fulfill his divine plan. This story teaches us that, just like Moses, our struggles and challenges can be used by God to guide us and prepare us for the missions He has set before us. They might not always be comfortable, but they are purposeful and part of God's grand design for our lives. Perhaps the most profound way challenges serve as guidance is in how they teach us to depend on God. In moments of ease and comfort, it's easy to rely on our own strength, wisdom, and abilities. We feel confident in our control over our circumstances. But in the face of difficulties, we are often forced to recognize that we cannot do it on our own. Through challenges, God teaches us humility and reminds us that our strength comes from Him, not from ourselves. The Apostle Paul's experience is a perfect example of this truth. In 2 Corinthians 12:7-10, Paul writes about the thorn in the flesh that God allowed him to endure. Despite pleading with God to remove this challenge, God's response was, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul then says, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul's challenge, though painful, taught him to rely more fully on God's strength. It was through his weakness that God's power was most evident. The same is true for us. Our greatest strengths come not from our own abilities, but from our dependence on God in the midst of our struggles. When we face challenges, we are reminded of our limitations. We cannot control everything, but we can trust that God is in control. Dependence on God through challenges deepens our faith and trust in His plan, allowing us to become more reliant on His grace and power to sustain us. This doesn't mean that God removes all challenges from our lives, but rather that He uses them to draw us closer to Him and to reveal our need for His help. As we depend on Him, we grow in spiritual maturity and become more aligned with His will. One of the greatest lessons we learn through challenges is the importance of surrendering to God's will. When life presents us with difficulty, it's easy to try to control the situation or manipulate outcomes according to our own desires. However, God's plan often requires us to surrender our control and trust that He is leading us in the right direction. Consider the story of Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac, Genesis 22. When God commanded Abraham to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice, it was a moment of extreme spiritual testing. Abraham didn't understand why God was asking him to sacrifice the child he loved so much, but in obedience, he trusted God's plan. In the end, God provided a ram as a substitute for Isaac, and Abraham's faith was greatly strengthened. This test was not about the loss of Isaac, but about Abraham's willingness to surrender to God's plan, even when it didn't make sense. In our own lives, challenges often require us to surrender, to release our fears, doubts, and attempts to control every aspect of our lives. By surrendering to God's will, we open ourselves up to the possibility of deeper guidance and clearer understanding of His purpose. In this section, we have explored how challenges serve as a means of God's guidance and direction in our lives. Rather than seeing challenges as signs of abandonment or punishment, we can view them as tools used by God to help us grow, deepen our faith, and discover our true purpose. Just as Moses' challenges were part of God's preparation for him to lead the Israelites, our own struggles can help prepare us for the plans God has for us. Challenges are not just obstacles, they are opportunities for us to depend on God, grow in humility, and trust in His ultimate plan. As we face difficulties, we can learn to surrender to God's guidance and allow Him to lead us to places we never imagined. Through challenges, God refines us, teaches us, and strengthens us to fulfill the greater purposes He has for our lives. Through our trials, we discover that God is always present, guiding us and directing our steps, even in the darkest times. As we depend on Him, we will find that His grace is sufficient, His power is made perfect in our weakness, and His plan for us is greater than we could have ever dreamed. Challenges in life not only shape our character and strengthen our faith, but they also deepen our understanding of God's love and teach us how to extend that love to others. Difficult moments are often where we experience God's unfailing love most profoundly. And it is through these experiences that we learn the true meaning of compassion and empathy. In this section, we will explore how challenges help us understand God's love more deeply, how they foster empathy and compassion for others, and how stories from the Bible, such as that of Mary, the mother of Jesus, demonstrate the role of challenges in growing in love and understanding. The idea that challenges are a means by which we can understand God's love might seem counterintuitive at first. After all, pain and hardship don't appear to be the most obvious ways to experience love. However, when we look closely, we can see that God's love is not only present in times of comfort and joy, but is especially evident in the most difficult moments of our lives. It is in the struggles we face that we often learn how deeply God loves us, and how much He is willing to carry us through life's storms. God's love is not only shown in the blessings He gives, but also in how He walks with us through our suffering. Think about the way a parent loves a child. The love is not just shown when things are easy, but especially when the child faces difficulty or pain. A parent's presence, support, and guidance during hard times deepen the bond and help the child grow. Similarly, God's presence during our trials strengthens our connection to Him and allows us to experience His love in a way that is not possible in moments of ease. In the Bible, God's love is often shown through His faithfulness in times of trouble. For example, when the Israelites wandered in the desert after escaping Egypt, God didn't abandon them. He provided for them manna from heaven, guided them with a cloud by day and fire by night, and protected them from their enemies. Even though they faced immense challenges, God's love was evident in His continual provision and presence. The Apostle Paul also writes in Romans 5:3-5 that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. This verse illustrates that God's love is revealed through the growth that comes from suffering. We learn to trust Him more deeply, knowing that His love for us is constant and unfailing, no matter what we go through. Our understanding of God's love expands as we experience Him being with us in the midst of our trials. Through challenges, we are reminded that God's love is not conditional. It is not dependent on our circumstances. Even when we are at our lowest, His love for us remains constant and unwavering. This realization changes the way we see not only God's love but also how we are called to love others. One of the most profound lessons that challenges teach us is empathy and compassion. When we go through hardships ourselves, we gain a deeper understanding of the pain and struggles others may face. Challenges help us realize that no one is exempt from suffering, and because of that, we are called to show compassion and offer support to those around us who are suffering. The challenges we face open our eyes to the vulnerability of others. When we experience pain, loss, or uncertainty, we become more sensitive to the struggles of others, whether they are facing the same issues or different ones. This empathy allows us to see beyond our own struggles and offer a listening ear, a helping hand, or a word of encouragement to those in need. It's through our own suffering that we learn to connect with others on a deeper emotional level. Jesus taught us this very principle when He said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Matthew 22:39. He modeled this through His life by showing compassion to those who were marginalized, rejected, or suffering. Jesus didn't just heal the sick and feed the hungry. He showed empathy for their pain, and in doing so, He demonstrated the ultimate compassion of God. In our own lives, The challenges we face often lead us to extend love and support to others in ways that would not be possible without those experiences. When we struggle, we develop a greater capacity to empathize with others and to offer the comfort we ourselves have received from God. Through our trials, we become more compassionate, and we begin to see suffering through the lens of grace, rather than judgment. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who grew in love, faith, and understanding through challenges. These stories are not only inspirational, but also serve as powerful examples of how God uses hardship to shape us into more compassionate and loving people. One of the most striking examples is that of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary's life was not easy. She faced immense challenges from the very beginning of her journey as the mother of the Savior. From the moment she said yes to God's calling to conceive Jesus, her life was marked by difficulties. She faced the social stigma of being a young, unmarried woman pregnant with a child that wasn't conceived in the normal way. She endured the fear and uncertainty of having a son who would one day face rejection and suffering, and she watched her beloved son endure incredible pain and death on the cross. Yet, through all of these trials, Mary remained faithful and trusted in God's plan for her life. Her unwavering love for God and her Son is one of the most profound examples of faith and devotion in the Bible. Despite her sorrow and struggles, she exemplified unconditional love for her Son, and through her challenges, she became a symbol of strength and perseverance in the faith. Mary's challenges didn't break her, they transformed her into a symbol of love and faithfulness. Her ability to embrace God's will, even when it meant great suffering, teaches us how challenges can lead us to greater understanding of God's plan and the importance of love, even in the hardest moments. Mary's example helps us see that suffering and sacrifice are not obstacles to God's love, but are part of how His love is expressed in the world. Through her willingness to accept the challenges God placed before her, Mary's love for God and for others became a powerful testimony of faith and compassion that continues to inspire Christians today. In this section, we've explored how challenges are not only opportunities for spiritual growth and faith building, but also powerful means by which we grow in love and understanding. Through challenges, we come to understand God's love in a deeper way, not just through His blessings, but through His presence during our trials and the lessons He teaches us in times of hardship. Challenges also help us develop empathy and compassion for others. They teach us that no one is immune to suffering, and through our own experiences, we learn to extend God's love to those who are suffering around us. We can connect with others in their pain, offering support and comfort in the same way God has comforted us. The example of Mary, the mother of Jesus, shows us that even in the most difficult and sorrowful times, we can grow in love and faith. Mary's journey reminds us that God's love is best expressed through unconditional love, trust, and faithfulness, even when faced with overwhelming trials. Ultimately, challenges are not the end of the story. They are part of the process by which God transforms us into stronger, more compassionate people, reflecting His love and grace in the world. As we face difficulties, may we remember that God is using them to grow our hearts, deepen our faith, and shape us into the loving individuals He has called us to be. Challenges in life are not random. They are an integral part of God's great plan. These challenges are not just obstacles, they are opportunities to grow spiritually, to learn to depend on God, and to develop love and understanding. Every challenge we face is part of the journey that brings us closer to God's plan for our lives. When we approach each trial with faith and trust, we discover that God is using these moments to shape us, strengthen our character, and deepen our relationship with Him. Remember, challenges are not a sign that God has abandoned you, but rather they are opportunities to understand more about yourself and about God. Embrace these challenges, even when they seem overwhelming, because they are the very means by which God will test and strengthen your faith. Each challenge you face is an opportunity to grow closer to His plan and purpose for your life. If this message has been helpful to you, feel free to share this video with others who may need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring how God uses challenges in our lives to lead us toward His divine plan. Let's walk this journey of faith together, finding strength and purpose through the challenges we face.